Hello, everyone. I'm Larry Dillon. I'm the CEO of the Wendover Corporation. You've tuned into Scalable Insights, where we interview people to help you scale your business. And today we've got with us Jeff, the producer. Jeff, how are you?
Fantastic. How about you?
Good. Well, I'm really excited about today. We've got my brother Bill with us.
Hello.
And we have Dan Caramanico. And Dan, we're thrilled to have you here today. You're a sales coach. Why don't you tell us your company, what you do, and give us some background.
Well, so basically what we do is work with companies who aren't happy with their level of sales, and maybe the CEO is here, but he wants to be here, and but he's not sure how to get there or why he's not scaling the way he wants to. So what we generally do is go in and assess his sales team. Now, the lack of scaling has to have something to do with sales. If it's because you can't produce the product, I'm not the guy, right? If you can't sell it, then I'm the guy. But so he says, I don't know why the salespeople aren't producing. So we go in and assess the team and find out whether they have the right, what we call sales DNA, whether they have the right motivation, whether they have the right skill set, and then whether management's doing the things that need to be done, and whether it's a holistic look at the sales function, and then find out what the issues are, and then we proceed to fix them. One of the major problems is sales management, or salespeople don't have the right skills, so we coach them to and train them, and sometimes we have to replace them. So we also do recruiting of salespeople, or I can either catch you a fish or I can teach you how to fish. So
yes,
that's pretty much it.
So there's a lot there, and I know from selling leads and watching different companies, because they all get the same quality of leads, right? So it's all the same quality, all different industries, all around the U.S., Canada, England. And it's funny to me where this one instance in Ohio that I'll never forget. So one of our clients who sold back in the day, remember Mitel phone systems? Are they still, they're still around, right? Yeah. So Mitel dealer, two Mitel dealers. So they're selling literally the same exact product in the same city. So one client calls and says, "Oh my gosh, that was the best list ever." Literally, this is what they said. "I booked an $800,000 deal, a $170,000 deal, a $50,000 deal, and we got a pipeline just from that, the best list ever," right? A couple weeks later, the competitor, same product, same city, everything. That was a terrible list. No one was moving. No one was interested. And you're just like, what is happening? Forget my leads. What's happening with your web inquiries, the phone calls in, referrals? What's happening with the rest of that stuff? And there's such a massive variance.
Yeah, it could be any number of things, and that's a typical kind of thing. Say, why aren't they selling? I don't know. I have to. Like my first career was, this is the impressive sales related. So I have 3 engineering degrees and an MBA from the Wharton School. But when I was an engineer, we would never just say, we're going to build a 20-story building on this lot here. And so let's start digging a hole and ordering concrete. And, there's always
That's funny.
A feasibility study. Like, can the ground hold a 20-story building? Will the code allow us to have enough parking? And there's all kinds of things you would have to look at. So that's what I look at our assessment as the feasibility study. I have this is an example for you. I have two grandkids who have great basketball DNA, and I know this because my daughter was a professional basketball player.
Oh, she was. I didn't realize she was professional.
She played a couple of years in France.
Oh, wow.
Led the league in scoring over there, and she's 6'2", and my son-in-law is 7 feet tall, and he played 5 years of pro basketball.
Oh, wow.
3 overseas and 2 in the NBA's G League. So these two kids have the right DNA. They're both tall. I mean, they're 14 and 11 now. So, I mean, she's about 5'11", and he's about.
That's crazy.
Yeah, with size 14 men's basketball shoes, right? So, and the 11-year-old he's pushing 5'5", so they're both big. Now, I don't know whether they're going to be great basketball players yet, because I don't know if they're going to have the motivation to develop the skill. I don't know whether they're going to, maybe they're tall, but they can't dribble or they can't shoot or something like that. So it doesn't look like that so far, but they have the right DNA. Now, you give me somebody 6'10" that can run and jump and has good hand-eye coordination, I can train them to play basketball at a pretty high level. But give me somebody 5'6" that can't walk and chew gum at the same time.
Right.
I could train them all day long, or I can coach the heck out of them, and they're not going to make it to the NBA, right? So,
right.
So that's what our assessment looks at. We look at what we call the sales DNA, which is a collection of a person's self-limiting beliefs with a few other things, right? So, but basically, if they have the right belief systems, I can train them to sell. If they have the right motivation, right? So that's.
Yeah, that's so quite often we know from working with our clients, like you've got some, and it's hard for us because we're the lead guy, right? And we're like, that guy sucks. And my reps have gotten to the point who've done this, and I'm sure you've experienced this as well. They can do an assessment over the phone, like within 10 or 15 minutes, because I believe the DNA of salespeople, they'll answer things in a certain way. They have a certain attitude and certain, you start, do you see that too, Bill? Like with.
Well, and when you talked about belief system, the one thing I've always told people, because usually, if we're selling somebody leads and you have the seasoned salesperson, he's always like, oh, more crappy leads, and immediately, you're at a disadvantage. Well, or people would say to me, I'm going to give this to Joe because he's really struggling. I'm like, leads aren't going to help a guy that's struggling,
It's a lot about the belief system. This is what they call an apocryphal story, but it illustrates the point really well. There's a sales team and, sales managers, the old school, where they had a meeting every Monday morning so there's a young kid there and he just can't sell, right? And sales, and he says, well, if I just had leads, boy, I could sell. If I just had leads, I know I could. The sales manager says, well, how many leads you need? He says, I got all kind of leads. He says, if I had 3 a day, boy, I could really sell. He says, 3 leads will be on your desk tomorrow morning, right? So the next day he comes in 3 leads. He says, oh, great. And he goes out. And, 2 weeks later at the sales meeting, he's killing it, right? He's selling a lot of stuff. And the sales manager is giving him a pat on the back how well he's selling. And he says, the kid says, where do you get all these leads anyway? He says, sales manager says, out of the yellow pages. Right? And so he believed they were good leads. And so,
That's hilarious.
Well, that's funny. We were selling to a tech company in New York, and our rule was your reps are not allowed to call our information until we come out and do an orientation with them. And we get to this one company, a fairly large company, and they tell us that they hired these 2 kids to call the leads, and we're like freaking out because it's been months, and we weren't able to get in to meet with them. And we meet with these 2 kids, and they go, Wendover, you guys are awesome. Your leads, and they were just killing it. And we sat down with them to try to figure out what was going on. Well, when they called up, whatever we printed was gospel to those guys. And that came across on the phone. They're going, hey, I understand you're doing this. We need to get in and meet with you guys. So it was refreshing because they didn't have that initial bias against the information because they didn't know any better.
Right.
I'm sure later in their sales career, they start.
Well, and the thing is that, with our leads, what we write down is verbatim what the prospect told us, right? We're planning on moving. We're not sure if it's going to be June or July, or and it's funny, to piggyback on that, our clients who believe in the opportunities sell more, 100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. I came back to Wendover about 3 years ago, right before the world shut down, and
that's just a coincidence.
great timing on your
just a coincidence.
And I had the opportunity to talk to customer after customer, and I had heard from a lot of people Wendover's information's not good, and I talked to this one woman that just sold her business. And she told me she had built her business on, Wendover's information for decades.
Yeah.
Decades. And when Larry started the Wendover Corporation, I still had the moving business, and I was a reference for people, and they would call up and say, we got these leads. These leads are horrible. And I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. We get anywhere from $250,000 to $500,000 in net new business every single year on a $5,000 year investment. It's not the information. And they use the same methodology across every city,
Belief systems are the thing that's one of the things that determines what your sales DNA is, right? The belief is a really important part. And, I use this little anecdote to illustrate the point. A belief that salespeople have, a common one that they have, is that people buy based on price.
Yeah.
Right. So if I put that guy in training for 2 days and I teach him 5 time-tested, proven sales techniques to sell value over price. Right. So at the end of the second day, he has them down cold, and I have video of him executing the techniques flawlessly. But what I didn't do in 2 days is change his belief. We didn't even talk about it. So he comes out with the same one he went in with, namely that people buy based on price. So 3 days later, he gets in front of a prospect. He says, so Mr. Prospect, how are you going to make your buying decision? And this prospect says, well, we're going to go with low price. Here's what he says to him. He says, makes sense to me. He says, that's what I would do. I told Caramanico he was crazy. And he's got another data point to reinforce the belief that he went in with. I can check back in 6 months. And he says, those techniques are in the plastic wrapper they came in. They've never been used because it never seemed like the right time to use them, right?
Sure.
And so that's just one. There's a whole collection of the assessment we use. We test for about 40 of them.
Right.
That are across all industries. There's plenty of them that within, pick the real estate industry or insurance or technology. They have their own belief systems that are just for that industry. So but there's other things too, like a sales that play into your sales DNA. Like if I'm more worried about whether Bill likes me than whether or not he does business with me, then I won't execute any sales technique which I perceive to be aggressive because it's too risky. He may not like me. And I'd rather have him like me than have his money. Now, I never get anybody to admit that, but that's how they act, right? Sure. So which techniques does he perceive to be aggressive, right? The ones that violate his belief systems. So in certain industries, I've had people say, well, you have to call on the purchasing agent. You can't call on the engineer, or you have to, they have all kinds of beliefs. And you have to deal with the belief before you can start working on the technique,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it goes back to Henry Ford. Whether you believe you're a success or a failure, you're right.
Yeah, I'm working with some people from Accenture right now, and I have this one woman, and she just wouldn't ask she's afraid to ask any question. It's funny, I asked her, she said, I don't know why. I said, where'd you go to school? I said, what kind of school do you go to? She said, I went to Catholic school. I said, yeah, well, there's the problem right there. Look, I went to Catholic school. The nuns tell you something. Yes, ma'am, and you move on, right? You don't ask why, And so you have to deal with this. So I'm working with her, and it's just about how to ask questions. She got an email from a client that says, "Give me a price on adding these 4 people to the contract." So luckily, I had a phone call with her just after she had gotten the email. She was busy working on getting the price. I just said, so what does he need these 4 people for?
Yeah.
And she says, I don't know. I said, well, what do you mean you don't know? Come on. I said, and why these 4 people? I mean, because he named 4 particular people that are already on the contract. I said, why is he giving you those 4 names? She says, I don't know. I was wondering about that. They're already on the contract. I said, stop what you're doing. Stop working. Pick up the phone and call them and ask them. I said, before you waste any more time, So it's just a belief, and she's a high level consultant within this major corporation,
right?
Afraid to ask questions.
So the key hire is the sales manager, right? So because if that's going to multiply plus or minus the ability of a team, right? So so what are the key characteristics of a sales manager?
Well, first of all, they have to have a strong sales DNA. And so one of the other elements of the DNA is ability to talk about money. If you're uncomfortable talking about money, right, then you're going to have a hard time finding out how much the prospect wants to spend for the product or service that you're selling. So you end up writing a lot of proposals that you have no chance of winning. So here's an example of how that would affect it. So let's say I have a sales manager who has that weakness. He's just uncomfortable talking about money. He furthermore believes that the prospect really shouldn't tell me how much he wants to spend. After all, I wouldn't tell anybody how much I want to spend if I'm looking to buy something, right? So that's the belief system he goes in with. Now he has Bill here, my sales guy. Bill goes out and he says, try to find out how much they want to spend. So Bill comes back and says, I asked him, he wouldn't tell me. He says, yeah, I know, I have that same problem myself. I can't help him. Right. If I have the same belief, I can't help him get over it. So the reverse of that was I had a client where I was coaching their sales team, and actually I was acting sales manager for a while, and the CEO asked me to make a forecast at the end of the year. I said, I don't know enough to make a forecast. How about if I critique you? I just substituted for the sales manager who was off doing some M&A work, and so he was back and doing his forecast. How about if I just critique David's? And he said, okay, I said, that can have some value. Me making a forecast is going to be useless to you. So right. He said, okay. So there was a guy, Glenn, who had this it was a $1.2 million deal in the pipeline. Now that was one of the 4 big deals they were forecasting. So I said, so I'm debriefing these 4 deals to see if they're really going to close. I said, all right, so they have a compelling reason to buy this thing? Are they really going to buy it? And if so, are they really going to buy it from you? Because he was claiming that we're the preferred vendor. And I asked him a bunch of questions. Well, he couldn't prove to me that from something the client said that they were actually going to buy it and that we were the preferred vendor. And I said, well, have you talked to them about money? And he said, well, I sent him a proposal for $1.2 million. I said, well, before you sent the proposal, did you talk to them about money and found out how much they want to spend? He said, no. I said, it was a Friday. I'm under the gun to get this done. I said, well, Monday morning, you got to call this guy up and ask him these questions to find out if they're really going to buy it and if we're the preferred vendor, and find out how much they want to spend. He calls me back about 11 o'clock Monday morning. He said, okay, and he gave me enough data to prove that there was enough pain they were going to buy it, and there was enough distinguishing pain that would be buy it from us. I said, what about the money? He said, yeah, he wouldn't tell me. I said, Glenn, there's no not telling you. They have to tell you. This is a $1.2 million engineering proposal. You spent countless hours preparing this thing. They owe you something, right? They have to tell you. It's not an option, right? You call them back, and I gave him 40 minutes of coaching on his belief system of why they should tell him and why he needed to know, and some techniques of how to ask and so. He called me back in an hour. He said, all right, here's the deal. If we can deliver for under $1 million, he said, well, they'll place an order in the first week of March. Now, there was some negotiations back and forth because they had to reduce some scope. They didn't just cut 20% out. There's some different changes and stuff, because inside of that thing, we were proposing stuff, but they were proposing stuff that we thought it would be nice that we thought they should have it, but they didn't really want it. Right. So it was extra cost in there. Well, they placed an order on March 9th for $986,000 at a really good margin. But that illustrates the point that I wasn't taking, this is the difference between weak sales management and a strong sales manager. I wasn't taking his weakness for an answer. There was no option. I made it more difficult for him to come back and tell me he couldn't get the answer than it was difficult for him to ask the questions. Yeah. He was just asking the question in a way that came out like, so Bill, you don't want to tell me how much money you want to spend, do you? They didn't say those words, but that's what his tonality said. That.
Exactly.
That's funny.
And that gets back to the belief system, because when I would coach people on how to execute on our leads, and you'd get off the phone and it was obvious that they're saying, you're not doing anything, are you? Or you don't have any need for our service, do you? And like you said, it wasn't in so many words, but that was the extent of the conversation. And people go, nope, don't need it. Bye. Thanks.
Yeah. But just to show you that people need ongoing coaching.
I want to bug you. Keep the mic close to your,
sorry.
a little closer.
Yeah, well, my problem is
just do this.
I'm 100% half Italian.
Italian, yeah.
So I keep
hands are going. Yeah.
So I just keep waving my right hand. I knock this thing down.
So no worries.
2 years later, right? And I was still working with the company, but I hadn't been working with Glenn for a while. I was working with some other parts of the company, and they had a new sales manager. And he didn't buy into what I was doing. So he had his own ways of doing things, right? So I get a hurry up call to the bullpen, it was in November. They were in Houston. They had proposed $1 million to this company who already had their stuff in one manufacturing line. Now they had another line they were putting in. So they thought, well, this is pretty much a lay down. They're using our stuff. They want our stuff. And they put in a proposal for $1 million. He said, but they balked at the $1 million price, right? And so now they feel like they have to go out and look at other, do some due diligence to see if that's the right price. He says, what can we do? They flew to Houston without an appointment to see this guy because, of course, it's the end of the year. They got to close the deal. They already promised management they were going to close it. And they said, so what can we do? He won't see us. What can we do? I said, well, did you talk to him about money, Glenn, before you submitted the proposal? No. They already told him that we'll cut our price to $800,000 to get this deal, right? And they said, no, we already committed. We're going to go out and do this. So what can we do? I said, there's nothing you can do. They're already committed that they're going to do this due diligence. They told you they'd give you another look at the end. I said, but so you screwed up by not asking about the money up front. If you knew they only wanted to spend $800,000, you would have given them $800,000 proposal. Right. And they wouldn't have gone out. You chased them to the competitor. They're going to come back, give you another shot. But this time you better find out some sort of a compelling reason of why they should buy yours versus somebody else's, right? And so it's just another example. They were trained, but they forgot. Yeah. Look, the best golfers in the world, whoever that is, I used to say Tiger Woods. I don't think he's there anymore. But whoever the best golfer in the world has a swing coach. And whoever his swing coach is, isn't the best golfer in the world, right? So, right. And best baseball players in the world take batting practice before every game. But salespeople, you know what they do? They take one sales course when they're 23, and that's supposed to last them for the next 40 years.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, because you need to keep sharpening your skills. And that's one of the things that I love about the podcast is I'll have folks like you in, and it starts reigniting like, oh, man, we've gotten away from that. Oh, it's a good idea. We got away from that. Mostly it's we've gotten away from that. Yeah. But it's funny you were talking about the money, and I've had the commercial real estate, and so there are people that I do business with for years. And this one particular job, they just came in really high. And I think because it was a big job, and I went to him and I'm like, come on, this is crazy. And I'm like, no, we blah 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 blah. Okay, so I went out to the market, and I got 2 other quotes for exactly half of what they were charging, and now that relationship is done. I'll never do business with them again. They don't know it, but we'll just never call them again. And you're just like, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's people are afraid. They're look. The people that we assess, 65% of them have what we call money weakness. They're uncomfortable talking about money. Sure, and 65%, and so. What's
the best way to gun to your head? Candidate comes in. You got 2 questions to ask them. What are those questions? Gun to your head. What are the 2 questions?
Well, first of all, I'm going to say there would never be a situation where I'm going to interview somebody where I haven't already assessed them. Right. And so look, when the NBA or the
you're saying the assessments do a really good job.
Oh yeah. Here's the numbers on this. We use the objective management assessment. It's judged the best sales assessment for the last 10 or 12 years in a row in the world. So here's the numbers. If we assess somebody and we say that they're hireable. Now, just because we assess them and say they're hireable, there's a lot of reasons still not to hire them, because the assessment only tells us what their sales DNA is. It doesn't tell us whether they're honest or whether they dress well or whether they can speak the English language or they can write anything or they know the product or are smart enough to learn the product. There's a lot of reasons not to hire them. But if we suggest that you hire them and you hire them, 92% of the time, they're at the end of a year, they're in the top half of the
Oh, wow.
top half of the sales force. If we tell you not to hire them and you're crazy enough to hire them anyway, 6 months, 75% of the time they don't last 6 months. So this hypothetical situation you gave me, before the person came in, before I ever meet the person or even talk to them on the phone, they've taken an assessment and I know what their strengths and weaknesses are. Right. So what question I'm going to ask, and by the way, if they don't have the right sales DNA, I'm not even talking to them. Right.
Right.
Only if my recruiter begs me, and just to keep him happy, I'll interview them. She says, this guy's really good. I said, all right, fine, I'll talk to him. Or maybe they're just slightly under, and there's a specific skill set that they have that we're looking for. Maybe I'll do that. But a couple times I've hired in the face of the assessment, and it's been a disaster. So what questions I'll ask. Interestingly, this assessment tells me what questions to ask. It says, here, ask him this question, and it'll verify this finding. Like the need for approval finding. So that's I don't really believe in these quote interview questions.
Yeah.
I was interviewing a guy one time. And we assessed them.
Right.
We were looking for a sales manager, and the CEO had asked me to manage the team until we could get somebody. And I said, okay, fine. It was supposed to be 6 to 8 weeks. Well, it was 16 months, and I kept telling him, I said, you got me in a conflict of interest situation because of. He says, what do you mean? I said, well, if I want to keep this gig, nobody's ever going to pass. And if I want to get rid of it, anybody's going to pass. He says, well, I trust you. I said, okay, let's put all the pressure on me, right? Well, he loved to interview. He wanted to interview everybody because he wanted to pick their brain about the industry and stuff. And he never rejected anybody. So we get these 3 guys. And I said, we can't hire any of these guys. The sales DNA is just so weak. And he says, what if they interview well? I said, it would have to be the interview of the century. I agreed to go ahead and interview this one guy who seemed to have the right background and everything. So he comes in, and we lined up a bunch of people from the interview. I was first, and then 4 other people, the CFO and the CTO and, a couple others. And, but I was the only one that the CEO really cared whose opinion it was. But he goes, hi, how you doing at 9 o'clock? The next time I got to talk was at 9:30.
Wow.
He went off, and I just let him go, right? So finally I asked him, I said, so how do you propose to grow the sales force? What's your strategy for growing the sales force? Well, I'm a hard worker. He says, I'll jump on an airplane. I'll introduce him to all my contacts. Now, introducing somebody to all your contacts is not going to help the guy. It'd be like Hank Aaron introducing a new young player to all the best hitters in baseball. Okay, terrific. Now I know, I met all these guys. It doesn't make me a better hitter, right?
Right.
He says, I'll jump on a plane. I'll go on sales calls with him. So after he gets done with this for a couple minutes, I said, what if I told you I thought just riding with salespeople was a waste of time? He went on, gave me 2 more minutes of BS, right? He goes on. And then he stops. And for the first time in 40 minutes, he became a real person. And he said, so was that like an interview question, or were you serious? And I said, I'm serious. I said, and I told him, I said, have you ever studied nuclear physics? He goes, no, this engineering stuff comes in handy sometimes.
Right.
He said, no. I said, well, you ever never heard of the Heisenberg uncertainty principle? And he said, no. I said, well, Heisenberg said that in a subatomic particle, you can't measure both the position and velocity of a particle at the same time, because in order to know how fast it's going, I got to make it move. Once I know how fast it's going, I don't know where it is anymore. And so a more general statement is the very act of measuring influences what you're trying to measure. Yeah. So if I send a sales manager on a call with a salesperson, I have no idea what he does when I'm not there. I could do a better job of finding out what kind of a job he did by interviewing him or debriefing the call. And that's one of the you asked me earlier what the skills of a sales manager. One is coaching, and one is debriefing. One is holding people accountable. And so I said, you're there. I mean, I've seen people. I had a guy. My daughter was in middle school. I was or maybe she was in high school. But anyway, so it was a parent thing, and I have to go to this parent thing. There's a eye doctor sitting next to me. we start talking. He finds out I'm in sales, and he tells me this story. He says, I got this guy Larry. He comes in and visits me, every couple of weeks. Because eye doctors actually buy stuff,
Right.
for contact lenses and stuff that they resell. He says he comes in, and he comes in. He's a nice guy. We talk. Hey, how about the Eagles? What about the Phillies? Blah blah blah. We talk, and he says, "Hey, Doc, what do you need? We got this new thing." And at the end, I buy some stuff, and then he goes away and comes back a few more weeks. But every once in a while, he brings his district manager, right? And he comes in. He says, "Good morning, Dr. Goldschmidt." And he said, and I'm wondering whatever happened to Larry, but I play along, and I say, and I listen, and he goes through some form, and the sales manager goes away thinking he does a great job, and he has no clue what he does on an actual sales call.
Yeah, that's true.
So a quick question. Is this the first time nuclear physics has ever come up in the podcast, the Heisenberg principle?
It is the first time. I did, when I was at Villanova for 1 year, and I did take a course on the moral implications of modern nuclear science and basically what it was, we have these laws, right? This is a law, that's a law, that's a law. But nuclear science, by studying it, it's like, wait, 1 every 5 trillion instances, it doesn't behave that way. So,
yeah,
good college
you were
education
Villanova
there.
For a year. I was there for 4. That's where I learned that stuff. Anyway, so
that's funny.
That's funny. I throw that in. I got to be the only sales trainer in the country that uses nuclear physics example. I have some calculus examples I use.
That's a good opening question for an interview. Are you familiar with the Heisenberg principle? Excuse me.
Yeah, but it's true. It's true. And I think that's, we always talk about like people, recognize that some of their competitors that are killing it have like really strong inside sales teams, and they'll try to hire one inside salesperson that's unsupervised. And inside sales needs to be managed every minute. Come on, Johnny, get on the phone, make that call, And I'm like, and I've talked to, I want to say conservatively, over the last 34 years, hundreds of people that are like, yeah, we know that's important, but we tried it and it didn't work. We tried it a couple of times, it didn't work. Of course it didn't, because the minute you walk out, they're on, ESPN or, social media.
Well, they have to be motivated. I mean, it's hard to motivate somebody, especially in a job like that where there's so much rejection, because you have to find somebody who is motivated, right? And they have to have the right attitude about the rejection part of it. I use this example. So it's like if it was a baseball game and you had, let's just say Mike Trout is the best hitter in baseball, right? Phillies are playing in a 4-game series. The first 3 games he goes 0 for 14, in the 4 games he struck out 8 times. So now you're in the 4th game. He struck out the first 3 times up. And it's the 9th inning. You got the winning run on second base, and and Mike Trout's on deck, and there's 2 outs, right? Are you saying, yeah, let's walk this guy and get to Mike Trout because he's 0 for 18 now? Is that what you're saying? No, you're saying get this guy out because he's due.
Right.
He's due.
Right.
Yeah. And so the top salespeople, and I would, for inside salespeople as well, they say they have to know. Like I know when I shoot baskets, I hit about 60% of the ones I shoot if nobody's guarding me, right? And I know if I miss 5 or 6 in a row, I'm due to hit the next one.
Right.
So if I'm in a game and I miss 6 shots in a row, I'm taking the next shot because I might miss 6, but I'm not missing 7. And if I miss the 7th, then I'm more convinced I'm going to hit the 8th. So I'm going to take that shot, right? So, but a person without a strong belief is going to say, "Oh, I missed 2 shots. Okay, let me try for rebounds or something. Let me I'll pass up the next shot." And so that's the attitude that you need in an inside salesperson. Okay, the last 10 people hung up on me, or I didn't get anywhere. So I'm on average, I know my numbers.
I'm closer to a yes.
Yeah, I'm much closer to a yes.
Yeah.
So.
And what are for sales management? What are, and I guess it probably depends from industry to industry. Like, what are the key, sort of metrics that you think are the basics
Yeah, look, everybody keeps track of how much somebody sold, right? I mean,
Right.
every company everywhere has that, right? But what they don't do is keep track of what I call a sales activity plan. So if you set down at the beginning of the year, I'm supposed to sell $1 million worth of stuff, right? And you do this for each individual salesperson. You have to, based on whatever base they have, and you do it on the individual goals of each salesperson. I mean, there's some floor, they got we want at least this much activity. But I would sit down with my salesperson and say, well, what do you want? What are your personal goals? What are you trying to earn? Maybe they want to earn $150,000 a year. Well, let's say they get a $90,000 base, so they got to come up with $60,000 in commission. So so maybe they make $1,000 every time they make a sale. Well, all right, so they need 60 sales. Well, if you need 60 sales and you close 1 out of 3 proposals that you submit, then you need to submit 3 proposals. I need, 180 proposals. And then I need, how many qualified opportunities do I need during the year to come up with 60 proposals? Well, I probably need 100, so 40 of them die because they ran out of money or changed their mind or something. So I might need 100 qualified opportunities. Well, if I need 100 qualified opportunities, how many first appointments do I need to go on in order to turn up 100 qualified opportunities? Well, maybe it's 200, right? And so, and then how many conversations do I have to have in order to turn up, the 200 meetings? Well, maybe that's 1,000. All right. So now I have a sales activity plan for a year. And if I did those numbers right, it's something like, 20 conversations in a week, and I got to have 4 first appointments in a week, and and on down the line. And now I track it. And when you play any kind of sport, pick tennis, right? If you're just hitting balls back and forth with your buddy, right? Ball goes wide. What do you do? Say, pick another ball out of my pocket and hit that one, right? But if you're playing your brother or your friend for just even bragging rights, you'll bust the gut trying to hit that ball, right? Yeah. And so when you keep score, you automatically go. And this is how it works. I took over managing a sales team for while I was recruiting them as sales manager, because the CEO was just totally frustrated with his sales manager, and he said, "Can you fix him?" I said, "I don't know. Let me assess him, and I'll tell you whether I can fix him or not." And I said, "Yeah, no, can't." He wouldn't make a bad sales guy, but he's he's not good as sales manager. So he said, "All right." So he fired him, and he put me in charge while I was recruiting somebody. So I did this with the people. They were selling a monthly recurring revenue. They did cloud hosting. Okay. So they were supposed to sell $10,000 worth of monthly recurring revenue per salesperson per quarter, right? So based on that, I came up with a sales activity plan for everybody, and I tracked it for three months, right? And at the end of the 3 months, I totaled everything up. And I was looking at it every day, and I reminded them every day. They had to they put it into the CRM, and we could run reports out of that. And I was, we had a sales huddle every day, right? Where they showed up for 15 minutes, right? And it was 6 or 7 of the salespeople, and every meeting lasted no more than 15 minutes. I said, "All right, what happened yesterday?" And because we were so focused on the number of appointments booked, they reported every day how many appointments you booked yesterday, and how many conversations did you have. And but at the end of the 3 months, and then that told me where they were running into problems, and we could do coaching and training. They were getting some coaching and training along the way. So at the end of 3 months, I totaled everything up, and I gave them credit for things I thought were going to close in the next couple of weeks, and it turned out, on average, they were closing $5,000 worth of monthly recurring revenue per quarter, which is half. Yeah. So I said, all right, that means the numbers that we assumed. So I when I do these sales activity plans, because most companies don't have any data, they don't know what their conversion ratios are.
Exactly. Yep.
I use what I call PFA numbers. These are numbers that are picked from air. And
you got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And we guess at the numbers, or provisional numbers, and then we track it, and we'll find out what they are.
Right.
And it shouldn't take more than 15 minutes to come up with this. If you spend more than that, you're wasting time because
Yep.
the economy is going to change, skills change, the market changes, everything changes. So we don't need to make a scientific project out of it. Guess at the numbers and track it and find out. So I said, all right, well, on the surface, you'd say, well, you got to make twice as many calls, right? Well, or if they're already working hard, how are they going to make twice as many calls? Well, you know what I found out for this one guy named John, I said he was calling on I said, stop calling on deals that are $500 per month. Now call on $2,000 deals per month. So if you close one, you did something, right? So we were able to do that. And in that particular instance, when I started the assignment, the CEO said, this guy Jason, he said, yeah, Jason's not going to make it. He's not going to make it. He's been here about 3 months. He's not going to make it. Well, I had assessed the team, and I said, no, he's got skills. He's got some of the right DNA. I think he can do it. Well, through coaching and whatever, after about, I'd say 2 to 3 months, he comes to me and says, yeah, Jason's really, first, after a month, he says, I'm starting to be impressed by Jason. And after 2 months, Jason's really doing well. The third month, he says, I think we should take Jason and give him all the big deals. I said, okay. Calm down. These are kind of mistakes that CEOs make or management makes. And I said, no. I said, he's good, but he's not ready for that yet.
Right.
And so I was coaching him up, and in the next quarter, which happened to be the fourth quarter, because he put a lot of stuff in the pipeline. In the fourth quarter, he did $19,000 worth of monthly recurring revenue. Right. But since I'm tracking his daily activity, we're tracking it weekly. And I said, Jason, by the end of September, I said, Jason, you're way behind in your activity. You don't. He says, but I've got to close all these deals. I said, yeah. I said, yeah. He said, I got to write these quotes. Yeah, write them at night. I said, because you can't call anybody at night. I said, because you're in Jason Inc. Right. You may think you work for the company, but you're in Jason Inc. You're trying to earn this. I said, so, put the kids to bed, then work on a proposal. You got to make these calls. I begged them. I literally, because I knew him pretty well by now. This is an approved management thing. I literally grabbed him. I said, Jason, please make the calls. Right? I'm begging you. Yeah. Anyway, he didn't lead. And so guess what his first quarter looked like?
Nosedive.
Yeah, nosedive. And by December, I had put the sales manager in place. Now I stayed in touch with what was going on. And he said, by February or beginning of March, the CEO wanted to fire Jason now because he was. I said, oh, jeez, But I had to go back in that company 3 times. I kept setting it up. The CEO kept breaking it.
Yeah.
Right. So
that's got to be frustrating.
Yeah.
But that also points to the inside-outside sales model, where you got people that Bill and I worked on a project in the 90s. We launched technology marketing reports, and we went from 2 employees to 200 in 18 months.
Wow.
We had 15 inside salespeople, and 15 outside salespeople. So Bill had his own full-time inside salesperson. He never touched the CRM. He didn't know his schedule, so she would call him up and, Bill, you're going to go meet this company. Bill would come out and he'd say, send him this, send him that, follow up in 2 weeks. What's my next one? You go out to the next one. His hands never touched it. So I had 15 sales reps doing 60 appointments every single day. And the product was a minimum of $20,000.
So,
every single day. Yeah. And they never touched the database. And what happened was, because Bill could probably talk, I'm going to ask him to talk a little bit more about this. They were so tight that you couldn't pass some junk on to Bill, because Bill's your only client. And Bill's got a lot of pressure, I think more pressure on him, and maybe you can correct me if you're wrong, to close the deal, because they're partners in the commission, and it sets up this unbelievable dynamic. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that, because that was an unbelievable experience.
Yeah. First of all, a lot of salespeople have kind of a bias against appointments that they haven't set themselves until they get. I had an appointment setting business, and we had dedicated reps, and the reps that set appointments for our clients, salespeople, got to know our reps and believe in it. And our clients would give us credit for marginal opportunities because same thing. They had a commitment to the rep. So Cheryl and I worked together. We were handling New York at the time, and she started learning some things about the what was going, like, for example, she would schedule an appointment, for Monday. Well, that's a federal holiday. Yes, you will be in the office. Yes. Okay. She'd confirm the appointment. I go in 10 o'clock on Monday, doors locked, and, so, she knew I don't schedule any appointments on any bank holidays in New York City. Even, it's not even a financial services company. So there were certain things that we learned together, and in terms of the types of opportunities, and like Larry said, one, I had a commitment to Cheryl in terms of, and I believe that she was setting good appointments for me. And it was just a phenomenal experience. You talk to anybody that was with us during that time, and the inside outside reps. I mean, it was so tight, and it freed up the outside reps to be doing, to be closing business and supporting customers. And back then, we were actually had to go in and train our clients on how to execute on the leads, because most of them weren't salespeople; they were technical people that were turned into salespeople.
In that model, there has to be some trust between the inside and the outside person, because they depend on each other. So they're not going to send you with,
And I would tell you, we had 100 people in our call center. So periodically, they would take resources from the call center, and they would have them schedule appointments for us. And my philosophy was, if I've got an opening in my schedule, shame on me, I'm going. But I will tell you, a lot of the reps had a bias. They're like, oh, no, not from Melissa.
See? It's getting in his head. Getting in his head.
They're like, oh, crap, So there was that initial bias, but it really, really worked well. And especially for larger ticket items where you can have that kind of relationship. It just makes, we were talking about it on with another one. We remember the 60-minute man. Right. You had one guy play both sides of the ball. He did everything, and then they found that if you specialized in certain things, like our inside reps were nurturers. I used to tell my prospects, Cheryl's going to be calling you. It'll be like a pit bull with very soft teeth. She's not going to let go, but it won't hurt. I'm like, she will pursue you. She will, be relentless. And it's a phenomenal model, and people just don't embrace it, especially leaders that have not carried a bag and don't understand the sales process.
That's what I pay my sales reps to do, right? And that's the mistake. And it costs a lot of money to do it, but you'll destroy the competition, because you just can't get that kind of activity out of a.
So what you demonstrated there was a skill that salespeople need to have. Is what we call an upfront agreement. What you did is set an upfront agreement for what was her name? Melissa was Cheryl was going to follow up behind, and she's going to follow up a certain amount of time. So that it's not a surprise. Why is she calling me again?
Every time it happens, I'm sure they chuckled.
Yeah,
instead of getting ticked off.
Yeah.
But people,
there's a lot of skills, but just like we said before, you got to keep managing them, because they forget, and I can't tell you the number of times I would go back into a company and somebody says, oh yeah, I forgot all about that. Yeah, that used to work really good. Well,
yes,
look. Everybody has a self-defeat mechanism, right? So one of the best self-defeat mechanisms is find something that works and stop doing it.
Exactly. It's kind of the reverse of the Einstein principle,
That's funny.
That's funny. When I started my appointment setting business, I spent a year traveling around and meeting with Microsoft partners, teaching them about cold calling. And the first thing I would ask the group is, how many people here are responsible for sales? And almost everybody in the group that I was presenting to were responsible for sales. And I would ask them, how many of you have been through some kind of formal sales training? And at the time, and this was like 2005, 2006, less than 20%. had done it. And like you referenced before, I think salespeople are really lax in terms of continuing education as a professional. You know, my brother's a dentist where, you know, probably goes to 12 continuing education, you know, programs a year.
Yeah.
And as you said, a lot of times it's things that worked in the past that they've just gotten away from. And so that's, Cheryl used to call it the twat in the back of the head, the little smack saying, you know, oh
it gets
yeah.
back to the I mean, continuing ed credits are fine, but one time one of a colleague decided we would get a course approved by the state of Pennsylvania for continuing ed, and we could, you know, sell the course to, you know, anybody, right? Well, we went through this arduous process of, you know, it had the curriculum and all that, but then they told us, yeah, once we were approved for one course, we could make any other course we wanted to. And you know what? Some of I thought they didn't ask any questions about what was in the content. You know what they wanted to know? How far was the classroom from a swimming pool or the beach? Because they didn't want it to be a scam where you're just at the beach all day. And I'm like, all right, this is so. I don't have a lot of faith in continuing ed, but the sales manager's job is that coaching. So the sales manager should be holding people accountable. I mentioned that was one of the 3 major things that salespeople have to do. They hold them accountable to, well, the usual things like showing up for work and, you know, not violating company policy and that kind of stuff. But the 2 most important ones are hold them accountable to following the sales process. You know, so there's when we go and assess a company, it's inevitable that people come back with no sales process. Now these same people, right? If they're a grill master, you know, like they consider themselves a master griller or something. If they're going to cook a hamburger, there's a 16-step process for how to cook this hamburger, this steak. If they cut their own lawn, they cut it the same exact way every time. There's a set way that they do it. Sales, yeah, we wing it.
Yeah.
You know, we just
Right.
whatever comes, right? So his job is to hold the salespeople accountable to following the steps in the sales process and to utilizing the techniques that they've been taught in certain situations, like finding out how much the prospect wants to spend. And the second thing they hold them accountable to is following, is making enough calls, is following their sales activity plan, right? And so when you hold them accountable, so this is sales management in a nutshell, right? I hold them accountable to the sales process. I hold them accountable to the sales activity plan. And when I do that, belief systems pop to the surface, right? So that example I gave you where the people were doing the cloud hosting, you know, I got all kinds of, how I can't work any harder. I said, I didn't say you had to work harder. I said, you're working too hard now, right? You know, you're calling on people that, this one, he kept calling on nonprofits. I said, you ever call on another nonprofit, I'm going to smack you up the side of the head. I said, you can't ever find anybody that has authority to spend any money. So I said, call on like companies that are actually trying to make a profit. So, so the belief systems will pop to the surface, and the key skill, or I'll call it a knack, or of the sales manager, is to discern when this call didn't go the way it was supposed to. Why didn't it go the way it was supposed to? Was it they skipped a step in the sales process? Was it a belief system that got in their way? That one example I gave you earlier about my friend Glenn, who had this $1.2 million. Well, in that case, it was both, right? But then when he came back from the second time, when he could ask the questions about what they needed and why they needed it, but he couldn't get across the idea that they had to tell him how much money he wanted to spend. They wanted to spend, and I recognized that it was a belief system issue. So you can't get. It's hard not to get frustrated with them. Right? And say, all right, realize, you know, like you can't get frustrated with a 1-year-old because he can't walk yet.
Right.
I mean, you know, I mean, I always say, sometimes I say, how many times would you let your 1-year-old fall down, right, and fail before you finally decided, that's it, I don't want him to get hurt, that's it, no more walking. You were just going to forget about that whole thing, and you're just not destined to walk, you know. I mean, it's absurd, right? And so, yeah, you can't get frustrated with the 1-year-old. You know, you say, well, he's not ready.
Yeah.
So he'll walk when he's ready, you know. So and so the sales manager has to be nurturing and help them. It's a little bit like being a therapist. You got to help them through this belief system. You know, my company's named Caramanico McGuire. The McGuire is my wife. I guess when we got married 49 years ago, she wasn't sure it was going to last, so she kept her name. And so
I've already got the entity. I'm not changing it now.
But she was. We met in engineering school at Villanova, and so she went from almost a PhD in electrical engineering to becoming a psychotherapist, to then go into sales training. So she maintains a small practice in marriage and family counseling. But I always tell my clients, I said, if I ever refer you to Marie, that means you've got more self-limiting beliefs than I can fix. and I've done that a bunch of times. But she's really good. She's really good at picking out those belief systems. Right. You know, I'm pretty good at it. You know, you do it enough. But that's the knack that you have.
Recording.
Okay, we're back. So, so we talked about sales managers and the key metrics that you're looking at and putting the plan together. And that's what we used to do in moving business and for TMR. We would break it down to exactly how many. I like what you do, where you back it up to how many conversations do you have to get the appointments, because we'd map it all out for what they needed to do.
We actually graphed first-time appointments and revenue, and there was a direct correlation.
Oh, yeah.
We had a 90-day sales cycle back then, and we knew when activity started dipping that 90 days later we were going to see a revenue dip.
Oh, yeah.
So that's when we bring everybody in, we bring pizzas in, and we do cold calling blitzes or whatever to spike the activity. But we track that very, very carefully.
And it's like I've been doing this for 36 years, I guess. It's the single hardest thing I have to do to get salespeople to do is track their activity. Is right. Their belief is that a minute spent tracking is a minute better spent making a call.
Yeah.
Right. But they don't track, and then they don't use the time to make the call. No. And I said, if it takes more than, if you're spending more than 15 minutes a week tracking your activity, then you're spending too much time. It shouldn't, like CRMs are great, but sometimes the CRM is too hard, or they're not using the CRM, or something. They just put tick marks on a piece of paper.
Yeah.
That's all you got to do.
And in our call center, we actually ran call band 4 times a day, 10, 12, 3, and 5. But everybody had a tick sheet on their desk so that they could see. There's something
visually,
something about, managing that kind of kept you honest, because otherwise at the end of the day, and if you wait till the end of the day, you only made 60 dials today.
Too late.
It was too late.
Yeah.
Yeah. I my belief, and I tell people when we do these huddles, I said, your job in the 15 minutes is not try to justify what you did all day, because my assumption is that you're doing really important stuff all day. As soon as I can't assume that,
right,
then you're not working here, right?
Yeah,
right.
So I'm assuming you're doing really important stuff, but it's never a crisis to make a sales call. Nobody calls you up and said, "Yo, Larry, I was on your list to cold call today. You didn't call, and I'm really ticked off about it."
Yeah.
Or you don't get calls from customers that say, "Yo, Bill, how long have I been your customer? Like 3-4 years now? You ever one time asked me for a referral? Am I a second-class customer?" You don't get those calls, right? And you have on your plan that you're going to make X number of calls today, but then a customer calls with a problem, and so there's plenty of other crises that happens. And if you don't track it, you'll know you were busy, but you don't know how many calls you made. And so,
exactly.
And sometimes I'm surprised. I look at my numbers, wow, how did I get that many calls made? So I don't care as salespeople. It's different on an inside job, but that's a different deal. But outside salespeople that are making their own appointments, and I don't care how many hours they work. I care how many appointments they had, and how many, and how much sales they're bringing in. I want to track them by the number of calls they make, not by the number of hours they spend. Right. So.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
So, so if we do for our lead nurturing program, like every like Bill was saying, like every 2 hours, everybody's working remotely. So that adds a level of difficulty. We had to do that because of COVID, and then not a long story, but anyway, and we have people working in the Philippines remotely. So what we do is, so there's a supervisor for, I think, like 8 to 10 people, and every hour they just run their numbers, right? I think it's every 2 hours. Every 2 hours they run their numbers, and we established this year. You do one of three things. You set the goal, how many dials you're supposed to make per hour, how many opportunities you're, supposed to tee up. And it's really easy. So they'll call, and let's say you're above your number. All they do is call up and talk to them. Like, hey, good job, man. You're 10% above goal. Good job. Then you call the ones that are smidge below. And then you call up and you're like, Dan, are you going to let Bill beat you? It's the easiest call, but also it just motivates them. And then, so that those calls, so let's say there's 10 people, those 9 calls, 8 calls, they're in line. And then you're down to the one person. And then you're just like, Dan, I know you can do it. You're way behind. For the next 2 hours, my schedule is cleared. I'm just going to sit behind you on a Skype call, watch what you're doing, because I know you can do it. And I'm just going to be here to help you hit the number in the next segment. And guess what? They don't want that anymore. But what happens, I think, is when you do the right activity, if nobody's noticing and you don't get the attaboy, and it's the easiest thing to do is just do that attaboy. And man, that really just changed stuff. So not just looking at it, but like if somebody kills it during a segment and they know they've killed it, I'm working really hard, but nobody notices. Yeah. Why do I continue? And one of the things, and I'd like to get both of your comments on this, is that I've noticed to that point, it's the people that suck, that aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing, that suck up all your time. And the people that are killing it, you just never take the time to thank them or give them an attaboy. What is, kind of what's your experience with that? Or
yeah, it's this gets a little more into psychology, right? But
Perfect.
There are people that are there are some people who are moving toward people, right? And there are some people moving away from. So some people, they'll do what they have to do to avoid, the smack, right? To avoid the adult supervision. And there are some people who are moving toward people. Like, I really want to get the attaboy, right? And so it's important to know what your people, which kind of person they are, or what they prefer. Like some people, so and that goes across the board, not only just for that, but for a lot of stuff. You just know what it is that they want from you, what they need from you, right? And so I found any kind of attention. Look, here's another general theory about people need approval. They all need approval. That's why that need for approval is such a big thing. Right. When I talked about it in Sales DNA, all people need approval. It's a human condition, right? Matter of fact, if babies, my sister and somebody else I heard recently, they went to Romania to hold babies because they were warehoused. And this is maybe 20 years ago when whoever that dictator was that screwed the whole country up. But anyway, and they had all these babies warehoused and they with no parents really. And so they go then hold the babies because if they're not held and they're not interacted with, they die, literally die.
Right.
It's called failure to thrive. So all humans need this. But salespeople get confused. They try to get approval from their prospects, right? What they need to do is get approval from their spouse or from their friends or from their mother or from their, if you can't get it from any of those people, get it from your dog. You always get approval from your dog, right? So we need approval, right? So you need, but you want to give the approval in the right way. You don't want to give approval, say, as much for, like you did a good job. There's some of that, right? But look, all humans as kids grow up, they start to believe that success in life comes from role performance, how I do in my role. So you get a report card, that you say, I love you, Johnny, you got an A in math, or I love you made the baseball team, or I love you because you made the band, or something like that. So that's how they start to believe that. So their role performance and their self-worth gets welded together.
Right.
And so you'll perform in your role in a manner that's consistent with your self-concept. So what you have to do is make sure that you give what psychologists call unconditional positive regard. So, it's like, so for kids, right, when you have a young, so anybody out there that has young kids like 2, 3, 4, 5, say, I love you because, not because you made the baseball team, just because of you, right?
Right.
So I did this with my daughter, and so luckily I had a therapist for a wife, and plus I learned this stuff when I was doing training. So I would always say, she's my favorite girl, right? And I would do that over and over and over again until they get to be about 13, 14, they don't want to hear it anymore, right? But she heard it so much that when she was playing basketball at Penn, she still doesn't need anybody's approval. She could care less what anybody thinks because she knows I care about her, right?
Yeah.
And so I say, if you have a daughter and you want to create a promiscuous teenager and you're a father, here's a really good way to do it. Just withhold your approval from her. Then she'll look for approval from every man she meets, right? And so that's how things work, right? So if you can give approval on the self-concept side, right? So hey, Bill, I really appreciate how hard you're working. I really appreciate. I'm really glad you're working here, right? And so I like you for you, not just because I like you even though you might not have met your goal today, So you got to be careful of how you do it, that it doesn't come across as you're a bad person. Like here's what I say. So if Bill goes out in the next week and he screws up the next 25 sales calls he goes on, so what do I know about Bill as a person? This requires an answer.
I don't know. I have no idea.
No, you know what you know about Bill as a person?
He's a good person.
Nothing.
Right.
You don't know anything about Bill as a person. You know what I can deduce? He sucks as a salesperson. I can deduce he doesn't know how to make a cold call, or he doesn't know how to qualify a prospect, or he doesn't know how to ask about money. I can deduce those things. That's in his role performance. But I can't. He could be the greatest human on earth, right? But I don't know it based on that role performance.
Right.
And we do that with athletes all the time. They look up to somebody. Charles Barkley was brilliant with this. He said, I'm not a role model unless you want to know how to dunk a basketball, right? He says, your father's your role model, not me, right? And he was right about that. So you need to do what you can to build up your salespeople's belief in themselves, right? And then they'll perform in a manner consistent with that belief, right? And so that's the point. And I see too many managers, whether they're sales managers or other kind of managers, that just spend all the time just beating the person down on our side. Hey, you're not doing well. You're just, you got to make sure that you do it. Now, when I was a manager back in my engineering days, right, when I was managing big teams, and even when I was in the service, I was in the Army for 3 years, and I was an officer. And I remember when I was just one of the big green machine. I was a private going, before I was commissioned, and you feel like nobody knows you, nobody likes you. Here I am. There's thousands of me. You can't distinguish me from anybody else. And for some reason, when I was in advanced infantry training, I was on the basketball team, and the lieutenant of the 200 guys, he knew my name. And I remember walking across the campus, the post, and I was walking with 3 buddies, and we had to salute. The first lieutenant came by, and he says, "Hey, Caramanico, how you doing?" And my buddy said, "Wow, he knows your name." I knew how that felt.
Yeah.
So when I was an officer, I would find any excuse to say. All I had to do was say, "Hi, how you doing? How'd you break your arm?" Or hey, what are you doing? Just anything to touch them as a human, and then they felt better about themselves, and so they would be better soldiers. But that didn't mean I didn't crush somebody that was not doing what they were supposed to be doing, right? But it's the same. I did the same thing was in engineering and managing people. I call a meeting of the draftsman. I call them into a meeting and give them some information, about why we're doing what we're doing. And I'll never forget, one guy pulled me aside. He said, I've been here 20 years. Nobody ever did that before. Well, I didn't know any better. I was a young project manager. I thought this is the easiest way for me to get everybody to know. And I remember that he felt like a human, so he's going to work harder. Right?
Yeah.
And so it's the same kind of thing in sales. Now, yeah, we have to do coaching and we have to hold them accountable. But just because they didn't use the right sales technique doesn't mean they're a bad person.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Who was it? Dale Carnegie that said, you're looking to for an excuse to compliment, to give someone a sincere compliment.
Yeah. Look for catch somebody doing something right.
Yeah.
But and so
this is beyond that.
And all humans need they need approval. They need strokes, right? Yeah. And they crave positive strokes, right? But you know what they can't stand? No strokes.
Yeah.
Right. So they will. If you ever have a kid that acted out, right? And it's because you're ignoring them, right? And so I'll act out. So at least you're paying attention to them. Yeah. I remember my daughter was 3 years. She was probably 3 years old because she could talk, and my wife and I were talking. We're at dinner, and she's acting out, right? I said, "Are you? Did you need our attention?" And she said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, look, when you need our attention, don't just throw things on the floor. Just say you need our attention, and we'll give you some attention." And I remember coming home after I taught her this. I come home from work, and I'm trying to read the newspaper. This is how long ago this was. I told you she's 44, right? And she comes over and says, "Dad, I need attention." I'm like, oh, jeez. I'm like, oh, what do I do now? I put the paper down and I play with her. I need attention. So, so we made it. Her need for approval was on the surface, right? So, she didn't need it from anybody else. So when they started writing articles about her in paper, they say the humble Diana Caramanico, and then they say the always humble. Then it was almost humble to a fault, So she got put in the Hall of Fame, she said, "Well, I had the easy job. My teammates they set the picks, they made the pass. All I had to do is catch the ball and shoot." But that's what you want in a salesperson, that they don't need the approval from the prospect. They can get it from you, right?
Yeah, because they're going to deal with more rejection than not. So, our dad had an expression. He always used to say, "You're not a bad kid, but some of the things you do aren't good." So he always made you feel, your self-image was always good, but sometimes your actions were not. But on the flip side, I always felt, even in the moving business, we had 50 movers, and I always felt that on every team there were two pressures. The guy at the top was drawing everybody up to that level, and the guy at the bottom was sucking everybody down to that level. Number 9,
and they're more vocal.
At least I'm not 10. So, I was always a big advocate of pruning. If you can't improve that last position, then you got to replace them, and that'll push the performance up in general. So when what do you find is when you kind of give up the ghost on somebody, or
that's a good question.
When can you regardless of all the support and training and coaching that you're giving somebody, that he's just not producing, and consequently sucking down the performance of the team.
Yeah, look, there's sort of, nobody likes doing that, right? I don't know anybody says my favorite part of the job is when I have to fire somebody.
My daughter enjoyed firing people. She used to go around the office when she was small and go, "You're fired, you're fired, you're fired."
But if you do what I suggested before about sales management, where you're holding people accountable to, like, here's what you can't do. You can't not manage them and say, "Okay, here, I hired you're an experienced salesperson. You know what you're doing. Here's the territory. Here's the goal. Have at it. Check back if you need help." Or and then I don't manage them. I just let them go out and do their own. And then then you're looking at numbers and say they're not doing good. And so one day you wake up and say, okay, I've had it with this guy. And so they come in and fire him. And they're like, what did I do? And nobody ever told, then that's not good. But if you're managing them the way I'm suggesting, where there's, they know what the goal is, you have a sales activity plan. They know how many calls they're supposed to make every day. They know what the results are supposed to be, right? You have this, what I call daily huddle, where it's a 15-minute, check-in. And I'll coach you the rest of the day whenever you need it. I'll help you whenever I can. But I'm going to have everybody on the call for 15 minutes. And then I'm looking at the reports. And then once a week, I spend 45 minutes to an hour with them, debriefing their calls and coaching them and so forth. When they almost fire themselves, all right, because it's not a surprise. They know when they're not doing it. And you say, hey, listen, this isn't acceptable. That company I told you about where I had 6 or 7 salespeople, well, I mentioned about the guy Jason and the guy John. They could see themselves that they select themselves out. I say that if you do those things, they'll either get better or they'll get lost.
Yeah,
right.
And so but ultimately sometimes you have to let them go, and you say, okay, here's why, and you have data. So it's not hard to do. And at least a couple occasions that I can remember, this the first time I took over managing the team, and I had to fire this guy, and the entire senior management team wanted to fire. Matter of fact, the CEO put me in charge. He said, everybody's going to want you to fire Chuck. He said, but I didn't see anybody else selling $5 million deals, right? So the first day I meet him, he says, yeah, I sold this $5 million deal like 2 years ago. Last year, I didn't do any selling, right? I was just kind of babysitting that project. And I said, no, I don't know what's more stupid, like going a whole year without making a sales call or telling your new boss you just went a whole year.
Right.
So I said, okay, fine. And I knew the CEO's pain. He was afraid that Chuck had these contacts at Fort Monmouth. We were selling to the Army that we would lose. So I just asked him, like, tell me who your contacts are. And then I debrief his interactions with those people, because nobody was managing them before.
Right.
And I said, do you know Julie? Yeah, she's the project manager. Yeah. I said, how well do you know her? Well, I had lunch with her once. Okay, well, he doesn't know her, right? And I went through the whole thing. And it took me, I had the whole senior staff minus the CEO screaming at me one day, you got to get rid of this guy. I said, I'm working on it. Relax. I know Bill's pain is what he's afraid of. And sure enough, one day it was $1 million deal, and Chuck had no idea where it was, and I said, he said, the colonel's got it. I said, what's the colonel doing with it? Is he just like praying over it? Is lighting candles? Is it has to go up the chain of command? Are they having a meeting? Or what are they doing? And I got real upset with him one day. I said, you got to know what he's doing. You can't. And it's been sitting around for this $1 million change order for about 3 months. We're waiting for it to hit. I no sooner again, I go and I'm commiserating with the CEO about this guy, Chuck. And project manager pops in. He says, hey, his CEO's name happened to be Bill. He said, hey, Bill, just thought you'd like to know that $1 million just hit our contract. And so we're commiserating. We're kibitzing with him for a few minutes, and he leaves. The door shuts behind him. Bill turns to me and says, well, that's the final nail in Chuck's coffin. I said, hold on a second. He just closes a $1 million deal. Now you want to fire him? He says, because I've been talking to him about it for a couple of months. He says, yeah, well, he had no idea where that thing was. So it tells me he didn't have anything to do with closing it, so we can get rid of him. Now, when I let him go, right, I told him, I met up with him at the Union League a little later, and he says, I said, that guy looks familiar. He comes up to me, and he wants to have lunch. I'm like, oh, great, And he's like, we're long lost buddies. I'm like, does he remember I fired him? So if you do it the right way, it's not hard.
I always find they go and find the right place for themselves.
Yeah. Exactly. It's from a management perspective, and a lot of managers will let guys hang on. If they're the lowest guy, if they're substandard performers, you're better off, cutting them loose and allowing them to go somewhere.
That's the self-limiting beliefs of the manager.
Successful.
Right? Yeah. Well, and also a very successful buddy of mine grew a very large company in 10 years, like crazy numbers. And I asked him, what's the biggest mistake that you make? And he said, holding on to Johnny, the sales rep, for too long, because Johnny's a nice guy.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a lack of definitely not a lack of management, but here's a guy who's like doing a good job of managing all the the sales team, and yet he says, hold on to Johnny for too long because Johnny's a nice guy. And I've literally given speeches where I tell the story about, and I said, what's the key to your success? He goes, well, Larry, we got 40 sales reps here in Philadelphia, and every day they're out knocking on doors. And I'm from Boston. I'm like, what do you mean, cold calling? He goes, no, knocking on doors. And went from 0 to 100 million in sales in 10 years. And you get, at that point, you're just like, okay, tell me how you did it. I'm just hold my calls. I'm going to take notes. But that was a success, cold calling and that. So they were mandated every single day from, I think, 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock. All 40 of them had to be out knocking on doors. So he knew 100% that that's where they were doing it. And then he would just meet with them, once a week and just say, okay, bring me 2 or whatever it was, 3 new prospects. Because with that activity, you should have 3 new prospects in that. Yeah. But even with all of that, he's still holding on to Johnny for too long because Johnny's not because he liked him. And I've literally given that speech. I've dropped that example in a speech, and you look at the people in the crowd, and they're going, "Oh," you know what I mean? Like, oh, and they're thinking Jimmy, Johnny, Sally, Betty, and they're like,
the worst thing. They say he's got a great personality or something like that. Yeah. I say, look, you line me up 10 salespeople. Yeah, they'll probably have at least 10 to 11 to 12 different personalities in there, right? And some have more than one. I mean, it's the personalities, not it's. Right. As I told you, what matters is the 2 best salespeople I've ever known. One, I had a franchise. He was the best, and now the guy who runs that testing is. Both of those guys are introverts. Yeah. The one guy, if you gave him a choice, he'd sit on his boat, right? You put him in front of a group. He was a great trainer, but he didn't like people. And I, I put myself in that category. Look, you put me in front of people. I like you guys and all that. But my wife is always telling me, "said we need more friends." I said, "Why? We need more. Go find them." I don't know.
Hey, gotta go.
Okay. Well, listen, this is a good time to wrap up. Listen, I'd love to have you back on because I think we just scratched the surface. This has been almost 2 hours.
Really?
Can you believe it?
No.
Yeah, it's crazy. But thank you. This was really
Larry, I had a lot of fun.
Top shelf. Yeah. And Bill, thank you very much. And Jeff, the producer, thank you. So remember,
is he still awake?
He's still awake. Yeah. Oh, yeah. You heard about his saga last night. So listen, click the like button, send us comments. What else, Jeff?
Subscribe.
We're on Spotify, YouTube. Where else?
LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok.
TikTok's really booming. I think we're up to 100,000.
Wow.
Total views. Is that right?
On TikTok?
No, all across all the platforms.
Yes, across all platforms. We're
across all the platforms. Yeah. Yep. So
if you want to hear any more crazy stories, just contact Larry.
Yeah.
And he'll contact me and I'll tell you some stories.
Listen, why don't you give yourself a plug for what you do and how they can reach you?
Well, my website is caramanico.com. That's Caramanico. It's danc@caramanico.com. And if you want, I send out a weekly sales tip. It's 1 minute, and when I send you the email,
it's video, right?
It's video, and it tells you this. Take 63 seconds and watch this video about how to close more deals or something. It's one tip every week, and just send me an email, and I'll add you to the list.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
thanks everyone.
Take care.